What's going on, everybody? This is Political Bombcast. It's going to be the first episode. We have myself, Ronald Tracy Robinson. We have D.L. Cummings and also Anthony Brown.
People's Champ.
The People's Champ and the Token in the middle. Absolutely. Now, Anthony Brown has touted himself as the activist. He is a token, and I am the pragmatist. I have decided to go ahead and go with that line right there, because there are things we need to do as far as outreach in the African-American community that needs a pragmatic perspective. And if we're going to connect any of our bridges, I'm going to look at it from an objective perspective and then give my input from there and move on forward. And we're going to take the time out to introduce everybody and what we do and what we stand for. We're going to start with Anthony Brown first, and then we're going to come circle back. And go ahead, brother, take it away.
Yeah, for those who don't know, my name is Anthony Brown. Like Ronald said, I label myself as an advocate, somebody who is a champion for those folks who've been neglected in these areas here in Jacksonville. My charge is to make sure, excuse me, that we can bring some resources that are going to be tangible resources for the community, so the Black community here in Jacksonville, Florida, is self-sufficient. Too often we want to get symbolic handouts, or we want to get something that is nice in terms of symbolism, but we fall short in terms of being able to have something tangible that we can pass down to our children, or that we can use for services and resources. A little bit about myself for those who don't know. I have been in the activist space since 2006. Initially when I worked with the Katrina evacuees in Columbus, Georgia, Fort Benning, Georgia, which at that time I was active duty. I'm currently in the military. I've been in the military for 18 years for those people who champion the cause for the service members. I'm that guy. During that campaign, we wanted to make sure that they were taken care of. They were displaced, of course, and 200 men, women, and children end up coming to Fort Benning, Georgia, where we were able to get them services and goods until the base commander wanted to take control, and things kind of hit the fan. That was my first foray with dealing with the federal government and some of the nasty politics that come along with it. From that time period, as I came back to Jacksonville, Florida in 2011, I've been a part of a number of different organizations, including the NAACP. I'm also the co-founder of Red Alliance for Justice, which is an organization that fights for the legacy of redlining and the unfulfilled promises of consolidation, something I'm sure that my colleagues and myself are going to be talking about moving forward. And right now, I am proudly 1/3 of the Political Bombcast. And again, we have a new mayor, so I am cautiously optimistic in terms of what she's going to do moving forward, because if we didn't provide any expectations to her prior to her taking office, it's highly unlikely that that person is going to live up to any expectations we're going to bring afterwards. So again, we're going to get into those topics and much more, but that's enough of me. I'm going to pass it to the token guy, man, to my left, to your right, and he's going to talk about, what he brings to the table and kind of describe some of the things that he's into.
So D.L. Cummings here, chair of the local Libertarian Party affiliate. And what I'm doing here is, let's kind of back up a little bit to what started kind of all of this. And I was on Facebook, and I'd gotten connected to just a bunch of people in general. And a dude that I hadn't really met, he reached out one day, he tagged me, he was like, hey, Libertarian Party needs to reach out to the Black community. Like, all right, let's start talking. Mm-hmm. So one thing led to another, and I ended up talking to a local leader here. He, I believe he I know he was instrumental, or at least, a significant part of the local Black Lives Matter movement here that we had. And then he does some other things as well. And I invited him to come and speak to the Libertarian Party here in Jacksonville, of course. And he did. And then the same night that he spoke, I think was your first night, Tracy's first night to the party. And he's been a longtime member of the Libertarian Party. And it was kind of funny because this gentleman comes in, and my intention was that he would come out and just kind of tell us, you know, from his perspective, being somebody that's heavily involved in activism in the local black community, kind of what's on the mind of the black, the members of the black community. And like his first, like in his first like 10 sentences or so, he was like, so who here has heard about reparations? And I was like, oh Lord, you know, like, you know, because libertarians, we don't want to give any money to the government, which means the government has no money to give to anyone else. And so it was kind of, you know, but it was really kind of like an odd beginning for a speaker.
It's a heck of an icebreaker.
I know, right? But everybody loved it. Like not necessarily the idea of reparations, but they loved hearing him talk. They loved hearing what he had to say. They loved the engagement.
You talking about Dallo?
Yep, Dallo.
Okay, we're gonna put a name on it.
All right. You know, I'm always afraid to say his name because I always mess it up. Because I read it and I think it sounds a little bit different than how I read it and how I would necessarily pronounce it just on first look.
It's like Seko Diallo.
Yeah, and I'm like, she's D. I'm gonna call him D.
That's like how my mom would say, don't say that, I might end up cussing.
Right, because I don't want to mess up someone's name if I can help it, right? Yeah. So anyway, so he comes along and he comes out and speaks.
Very eloquently, yeah.
And then Tracy decides that he's going to run for office. So that kicks off a lot of things. Now there's still this idea of like, okay, what are we going to do, you know, to outreach for the black community? And I have, I've been up twice now to something called Pork Fest up in New Hampshire, and they have this thing called the soapbox rant. And the way it works, you get up there, you get like 2 or 3 minutes, and you can rant about whatever you want, however you want. So you could be like super polite, you can say a poem, you can be, you know, very angry and yelling and screaming and use profanity, whatever the case may be. And you're just ranting about some topic that's important to you. Right. And this is a libertarian event. So probably all the rants are going to be related to libertarians and how they feel about things. And I was like, man, that'd be kind of a neat idea for a podcast. Like, why don't we have this thing where we reach out to the black community and we say, hey, give us a rant. And then we bring you on and then we talk about whatever topic that you ranted about, right? And you can rant however you want. This podcast is, you know, like my normal podcast that I do are very family friendly. This one is not going to necessarily be full of like F-bombs, but if somebody throws out an F-bomb, like, you know, that's what it is.
TV-14.
In addition to that, I think we didn't set out doing this, but I think to make this a mainstay and something that's identifiable with Jacksonville per se, we want that to be what this represents. So when you think about the Political Bombcast, you think about, oh, that's them guys from Jacksonville, Florida. And so it's something that everybody in the city, man, can wrap their arms around and say, this is something that is ours. We're very proud of the city. I know I'm very critical of some things in the city, and we'll get into all of that moving forward. But, you know, I didn't want to cut off DL, but I just wanted to say that we want this to be just as much something that you guys are involved in as we sit up here and have fun and do our commentary and come with our political perspective.
Right. And it's okay to cut me off because I am the token after all. So like, you know, I know my place. You know what I'm saying? Like
you're here because you're allowed to be.
Right. Like I mean, if you
really technically I'm the token because I'm not a libertarian.
So let's talk about that.
Here comes the crux of this whole operation. Go ahead. Yeah.
So let's talk about that. Yeah. So you know, initially I reached out to Tracy and I was like, hey man, let's, you know, how about this idea? And he's like, yeah, that's a good idea. But then the issue was like, okay, well, we don't want to just like, I'm a libertarian, Tracy's a libertarian. We don't necessarily want to just talk to the black community, be like, look, y'all should, you know, vote for libertarians.
This is what y'all should be concerned about. Yeah.
Right. If you're trying to figure out who you vote for, if you don't vote for libertarian, no, I was kidding.
You ain't black.
But,
yeah.
So
what Joe said?
That's what Joe said. Yeah.
That's what he said.
That's y'all god brother, by the
way. So you gonna make these folks mad though?
Man, let's do it.
What we decided was like we need someone to break up that echo chamber. So we started looking, and we had already been interacting with this Anthony fellow like on Twitter, and I was like,
so who is this relentless force of nature?
Right, like who's this guy? It's all over the place. And so I said, Tracy, you know him, why don't you reach out? And then we had a couple conversations and I was like, I like this dude. Like I disagree with him on a bunch of things and we disagree strongly on stuff, but that's what this podcast needs is somebody that can push back because what ultimately we want to do is we don't want to preach to somebody. we want to be different from other political parties, or at least that's what I'm trying to be as a representative here, right? This is not necessarily a Libertarian Party event per se.
Right. Because your views that you express are,
Right.
individual, and it's your own. It
And
doesn't
this
reflect
is
on
just
the whole
me
party.
as a person who kind of represents the Libertarian Party. I just want to introduce the ideas and have a conversation and say, hey, you know what? Maybe some of our ideas will be found very energizing to the black community, right? And so I just want to introduce the ideas, but I want to introduce them in a way where somebody like Anthony can come and be like, whoa, hold up. Right. Like what you're saying is not right, because I want, I want a different perspective here to challenge it. So that's what I'm doing here. And hopefully it works out great. And, a token.
That's
Boom,
it.
right there.
I just gotta say this too for the listening audience. We're constantly going back and forth on Twitter.
Always.
And, quick shout out to Yvette Cornell, ADOS, Tone, the whole crew. I tagged them on some things that she put in there. And I'm talking about ADOS came out. They were looking
showed
to
up.
eat some libertarians and spit them out. I'm not going to lie. I was entertained like Russell Crowe, man. But, them guys hung in there and they, said what they had to say in terms of what they believe in the whole nine. I totally disagree. I think black folks, man, been need reparations. I know I'm using bad grammar. We been needed.
Yeah. And
so, that was fun, man, to see that we could do that and see that folks, man, didn't get butthurt, man, and get upset.
Where we can all have dialogue and then just come to the consensus, hey, we don't agree with it. Even there was one gentleman, only one, that said, hey, man, good luck to you, Mr. Tracy, on what you got going on. But, hey, we're going to have to go ahead and diverge. We have to go and split our path. And I say, hey, man, hey, praise God and live righteously. At the end of the day.
Let's address the elephant in the room. Do you think there's an expectation of you?
I'm gonna go into that real quick. I'm gonna do a classic. I'm gonna do a classic Republican diversion tactic. Hey, let's go circle back around to that. Let's circle back to that. Hold on, but I want to do that by introducing myself, who I am.
Go ahead.
Kind of once again, my name is Tracy Robinson. I was a candidate for City Council in District 8, the original District 8 in Jacksonville, before they ended up 3 months left into the election, ended up switching the whole thing because of the claim that it was not racially properly representing the races of black people, even though it's kind of false, because ever since consolidation, 68. In 68, there have been a slew, almost 95% of black representation in Jacksonville as far as city council is concerned, and the majority of them being black women. So I don't know where they got the claim that it was racially gerrymandered. I don't understand that. From what I see in my perspective and what happened, they want to maintain a Democrat supermajority in that lower income area, which would be south of Trout River. And so that's where, because, of course, in the lower income area, they're going to vote more Democrat, most likely, always. No more welfare, more Section 8, more food stamps, the whole nine. More public programs are going to cost the city of Jacksonville more tax dollars. And we already have a tax burden of $10,200 each because we have a debt in the city of Jacksonville of $3 billion. Nationally, it's about $32 trillion as of June 2023. Now, digressing from that, my political journey leading up to me being a libertarian came probably during the Trump administration, where I actually claimed the Republican Party for a little bit, for like 6 months, until I seen what he was doing with the debt.
That's some heresy right there.
Yeah, it is. It's some heresy. You know what I mean? I'll go ahead and do that. I even had I even had one of those black Make America Great Again hats back then. Yeah, I never told you that, Anthony. I never told you that.
You did right not to tell me that.
Yeah. I wanted to wait until we got on the podcast. I want to wait till we got on the podcast to say these things now. Yeah. I wanted to wait until everybody can hear me. But the thing about it is,
he can't leave.
Yeah. See, now he can't run.
Wait. Well, you said what? You had what? Oh, hell no. Now you got me on the podcast.
Elder and who are some of these other conservative folks, man?
Yeah. But the thing about it is, what I appreciated was I appreciate the multifaceted ways that melanated people were able to express themselves politically, which is what I haven't seen in my life. It was always supposed to be, you grow up, you're going to be a leftist or a Democrat, and you're going to be for, more public programs, because we believe that the government was the ones that create wealth and give prosperity to a people. And we know from their record, that's never been the case. It never will be, because they can't create money, because all the money is appropriated from us. Now, when I seen that Trump he rose up the debt deficit to astronomical, places, even more than Obama in 2 of his terms. That's why I got out, because all the promises that he was making, that he was going to do with, small businesses, things of that nature, were all fiction, because you can't say you're going to make these promises but end up doing the complete opposite, which is put more people in economic destitution. Then you have the CARES Act, then you have the American Rescue Plan Act, which further put up the debt ceiling to astronomical levels, things that we're going to have to be paying on for as long as we're using the U.S. dollar for generations on. So now, by the time I became a libertarian and I came to that realization, that's when I became an anarchist, because that's when I realized that government is the sole enemy and the sole seat of racism. It's not necessarily the people. People can be just bigoted without government. They can just have a bad idea and they can move on and just have that bad idea. But with government, they are weaponized. They have weaponized that idea at the expense of everybody else around them, and end up becoming systemic racism that we see today. And both white and black people can participate in systematic racism. How do we know that? Because there's so many people, African American people or black people, melanated people, Afro-Americans, what do we call ourselves in this decade, that are in the political seat, that have political capital.
It's people of color.
People of color, that one as well.
That's what all the white liberal women like to call.
Yeah,
right?
people of color.
I gotta slide in and push back.
But hold on, let me complete this thought real quick. Let me go and complete this.
I'm feeling some kind of way. You got the mega hat on.
Let me go. Yeah. Hey, how do we say? This is before I got delivered, right?
You got me on here. Go ahead.
He ain't through me. You gonna be mad at what I said about what I did back then? Can we change? Are we allowed? But anyway, that's why I love this man. But anyway, we participate. Well, not we, but those melanated people in these higher seats of political power, or just seats in political. There's no really higher when it comes to government. When they're in these seats of government. And they say that by definition of what systemic racism or white supremacy, whatever it is, to have that kind of racial power, you got to have, that kind of backing from government to implement that weapon that is the central authority. And since we have the most political power than in any generation, it's safe to say that melanated people can be just the same agents of systemic racism as anybody else. Now, moving a little bit forward, when I had my first libertarian meeting with DL, Eric Parker, everybody else, and Secret Diallo
Shout
was
out
there.
To Eric, don't be mad at me.
Yeah. I know, right? Because he got tagged in that ADOS tweet too.
Shout out to Eric, baby.
Yeah. He was in there. Yeah, He was in the front lines. But I came in and I endured that whole day. I was getting it with him, bro. Shout out to Yvette. I love her very much.
They told Eric,
in spite of everything else.
They told Eric, they're like, "Why are you even here with your nonsense ideas? Get the hell out."
Yeah.
And he was like, "I got invited."
Yeah, for real though. I was like, he put me here. It was like, did he invite you to say this nonsense? Is what I'm trying to say. But anyway, before we diverge,
I just want to explain. So for the listeners who don't know, we keep talking about Eric. Can you guys kind of explain the situation and who Eric is in relation to the Libertarian Party?
Yes.
So for those folks who don't know.
Absolutely. Eric Parker was he was a candidate that ran at the same time that I ran for city council for District 8. He ran in District 2. And
That's where he started.
That's where he started. Mm-hmm. And then he eventually started running in at-large 1 against Terrence Freeman, and he ended up getting about 37% of the vote.
Yep, about that.
Which is the highest third-party voting percentage in Jacksonville. So he made history around doing all that, and he definitely paved the way for third parties to come on into this race and move specifically for libertarians. And so that's who he is, and he is still very active right now. He is very active on Twitter, and go and follow him, Eric Parker, at Twitter. And what happened was Anthony Brown tagged us and Yvette to, what's the last name?
Cornell.
Yvette Cornell.
ADOS
community with the post about reparations being paid to the Japanese when they were putting internment camps during World War II.
All right.
Yeah. And then so once we got onto the to the platform, Eric Parker and D.L. Cummings, they were there first. I was working during that time and doing some other things, so I couldn't really respond and sit there and rest in it. And so it was just getting in. But after all that, what I knew was specifically what's happening is he baiting. Anthony baited us all. He tricked us. He put into a beehive. And you know what's crazy? I knew it too. And I knew it. So that whole day after Eric and DL did their thing, I just maintained the whole day, started going in, because I love the type of dialogue that we had as salacious as it was, I appreciated it, because what I do love is having multifaceted expressions being conveyed to different type of people, because people think that melanated people are one hive mind and we're just homogenous, and that's not the case. But yeah, so that's where Eric Parker is. That's what, all that stuff. Right. But to digress from that and to go back to who I was when I went to that meeting, and going back to your question about, is there an expectation of me, being that I am what is perceived to be Black or African American, because I don't believe in those terms. I don't do Black, African American, none of those type of things. To me, like I told you before, race is a construct created by government to create chattel property, wards of the state, and to create more interest groups for more government welfare, to expand the welfare state and more government influence in people's lives at the expense of the people they say they're going to help. That's why I say melanated people. You can hear me say that a lot, because if there's any commonality between us as far as something as arbitrary as skin tone, we can say we are endowed with melanin. So yeah, I'll go ahead and say we're melanated people. But as far as the Black community, or that we're Black people, people really don't know what that means or what that entails, because it's so varied between different mindsets within the Black. You got the conscious community, you got the feminists, you got the socialists, you got the communists, you got the Marxists, you got the NAACP, you got the Southern SEC, you have anarchists like myself, you have the separatists, you have, all that. So it's way too varied to be put into this one sandbox, because that's tribalism with anybody. Of course.
When you talk about the white community, they like to categorize themselves in all of these different areas and or categories that they belong to.
Well, let them continue to do that.
But for me and for most people, and I agree with you, race is a social construct to separate people.
Unlike gender. But go ahead.
Based on race. But however, kind of where I push back is outside of tribalism, and that's what we're talking about, I still would like to be identified as Black, or I like to be identified. You can even identify me as a descendant of a Black American freedman, because legally after slavery, that's what we were. So if you want to put a legal term on it, that's what you can describe me, particularly as a reparationist. We'll get into that later.
Right.
But I stay away from melanated, because all of these other folks around me, they don't have the experience that I have as a Black American. They may have some color in their skin, but our experiences are innately different.
Right.
And so I want to be clear about that.
Right.
As people are listening out there, I'm clear. If you are for empowering the Black community, so we are self-sufficient, so we are where we are supposed to be in terms of being competitive with everyone else, I'm cool with it. If you're trying to lobby for the gay and lesbian community, I have nothing against them personally. No. If you're talking about Native Americans, if you're talking about such and such, no. If you're talking about empowering Black folks and being politically astute and us getting away from being politically ignorant and just voting blue no matter who, I push back on that.
Absolutely.
That's why I love you guys, because even though I don't necessarily agree politically with some of your stances, I don't believe you're necessarily on that plantation of people who are either white, I'm Republican, or in this case, Black, I'm Democrat, voting blue no matter who. So I just wanted to make that distinction between melanated, who we are, my distinction. You can either call me Black, legally you can call me a Black American freedman, African American, I go back and forth on that, but at the end of the day, I'm unapologetically Black and proud of it. And in addition to that, that does not mean I'm anti everybody else,
right?
Because I love myself. And I don't like pro either, because the Asian person doesn't say they're pro, even though they are for continuity and the upliftment of the community. That's only a distinction that they give to Black Americans, because we see many things through the eyes of the white dominant society. So if that's the vision and that's the perspective you see everything through, if a Black person says that I want independence, then all of a sudden he's going to be militant. He's going to be pro. He's going to be anti. He's not anti anything. He is doing something that we should have been doing a long time ago, which is grabbing our nuts as men, women complimenting that, taking care of these kids, and saying we're going to pull together our resources and we're going to uplift the community. And at the same time, we're going to hold those folks who mean to exploit us and harm us to the utmost authority. And that's what I represent. I didn't mean to cut my guy off. No, that's but I had to make that distinction, man, for the listening audience.
You had to make that clear, man. I definitely appreciate that, because it goes into the crux of what this podcast is even about. As you can see, even though we all disagree on many things, about 70% of a lot of things, you know. But what it is, make a rough estimate.
He had numbers guy.
You know,
he was like, all right, so Jacksonville is in this much debt.
Can it ever go down? Does it stay at 70%? Can it go down?
Look, economics is a living, breathing entity. So based on what we do in our interactions, it can always fluctuate.
Okay.
It's a living pulse. It can always, it varies. You know, it's not a static thing. It's always moving.
All right.
So let me ask you guys something. So you were talking about like, hey, you know, I identify more as a melanated person rather than like black or African American. You say, hey, look, black's okay, African American, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So like for me, like, I just am like, just call me DL, like, you know, like, and it was funny because when I was growing up, it was funny when we were talking about Sekou Diallo. I'm sure I said his name wrong. Sorry,
Psycho.
Sekou. No, I didn't say Psycho. I said Sekou. I'm gonna roll the tape back.
He's Psycho.
No, I did not say that.
Shout out.
Shout out to Sekou Diallo, man.
I don't know what you did to the man, but you psycho.
But so when I was talking with him, he was, you know, it kind of came up like my heritage, and for the longest time, I just kind of operated as if I was white.
Right.
And he was like, you know, you grew up in a household where you thought you were white? And I'm like, well, you know, my mom, who's my biological mom, is white. My dad, who adopted me when I was 3, he's white, right? Like very unambiguously. They're not like pasty white, but they're clearly white. And so I just kind of went with it, right? But it was funny because growing up, I'm bald now, but when I had hair, kids at high school would think I was Mexican. And like they would even say things in Spanish to try to, like, when they wanted to fight me, they would say like slurs in Spanish. And I was like, look, I'm failing Spanish, y'all, so I don't even know what you're saying, but like help a brother out. And then when I got a little bit older, I shaved my head, grew a beard, and people were like, dude, you look like you could be Middle Eastern, you know? And so then I did the ancestry, and it came back and it was like, you're Native American, or I like to say Indian because I'm old school like that, you know? But ultimately, I just don't really care. And people want to refer to me, like, you can call me whatever. You can call me white, you can call me Indian, you can call me passing. I don't really care. But here's the funny thing is that, and I'll say this because when I was growing up, the thing that I heard the most often was DL, but seriously, or no, Daniel, what are you? But for real, what are you? And I was like, I'm white. And they're like, no, but seriously, what are you? And I'm like, and so then I got older and I started asking around after I got my results, and people are like, no, I think you're a little something that's not white. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so more black folk have suggested that I might be black than white folk have suggested that I would be white. Including
Sekou Diallo, including him.
Psycho.
Yeah. And I'm not going to, that one's going to stick, and I don't even think I even said that. I'm going to listen to this video later. I'll be like, I didn't even say that. So,
let's see what I can edit out.
So all that to say, like I don't really care. Does it really bother you when people say like black, you know, Americans, or when they say African American, like when you hear it from other people, does that like, do you just like, man, I did it again? Or do you just like, I don't really care?
Those are the distinctions that we have. What I don't like is Negro.
Okay.
I don't like colored. This lady called me colored one day, and I had to go. And she was older. So I don't know if she had not been straightened out up to this point, but she was going to get some straightening in.
Right.
And I said, hey, look, don't go around calling folks colored. My name is Anthony. You can say black. You can say African American, whatever. That's fine.
Was she 90?
I don't know how old she was, but.
Because if you ain't like 90.
Colored, man.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Colored. I just the ancestors rose up in me. And it was like, don't let that woman walk away from you.
You gonna let her say that?
Don't let her get away with that. You go grab her, crush yourself, man, and let her know, hey, look, this is your name. This is who you are, the whole nine. But outside of that, no. Here's what I found with a lot of people. I found that as I get older, people are ignorant. There's a lot of people, man, who live in very isolated spaces, and they don't get an opportunity to interact with folks. I grew up in a unique situation in which I was born in LaGrange, Georgia. The elementary school that I went to, Dawson Elementary, was 51-49. 51% of the school was black, 49% was white. I don't know of anyone since I've been in Jacksonville after we moved here when I was 11 have gone to a school or been in a situation where it was that quote unquote diverse. We talk about diversity. It doesn't get more diverse than that. So for me, I'm extremely comfortable being around a lot of folks, but I can tell by body language. I can tell by some of the things that people say. I can tell by their political affiliation or their inability to be flexible with politics when it is convenient for them personally. There just is a level of ignorance there. Now, when the ignorance spills over into bigotry or folks acting on some ideas that they have about a person because they don't know any better, then I got to handle that. But outside of that, you know, if a person comes to me and they genuinely want to be educated or want to learn something about me, even if they do call me colored initially, you can tell the sincerity in the person. Most of the time, a lot of these folks are not sincere. They just say some stuff off the cuff or whatever. But to answer your question, African American is fine.
So it generally doesn't bother you?
No, it don't bother. Okay. Now I'm gonna tell you, the melanated thing. I think that's too broad of a term. Okay. But
I mean, I feel like I'm melanated.
I don't like melanated because anybody can slide in that category of being melanated. I'm not necessarily a fan of that per se.
Understood. Yeah.
Do you get bothered?
No.
When you hear these other terms?
No.
I mean, other than the obvious one, the N-word.
He's trying to be politically correct.
No, I'm really, because I really don't
does colored
care.
Bother you?
Yeah, does colored? No, all that stuff I prefer not. I don't do colored, Negro, black, you know, African American. No, I don't.
Okay,
no. I'm clearly not the color of this table. I'm clearly not the color of this microphone.
We trying to be,
I'm
deep.
Because it's a political term. It doesn't designate ethnic group. It doesn't designate your, who you are as a being. It's more of a political term to categorize chattel property and wards of the state, and that's how I feel that government uses these different categorizations to push different welfare programs and cater to different interest groups and get like the one drop rule back in the day, that caused such a migration of people to switch their racial affiliation, even contrast to their ethnic background. Like how they say, oh, well, just pay this little bit of money and you'll become Native American.
Right.
So you can get these benefits.
For those who don't know.
Is it possible that the term African American or black is kind of twofold? Like on one hand, it's something that people can just kind of say, a way that they can reference a certain group of people in general, just a generic term, and the point but then also one that the government uses to help divide us.
For African American, I would say that would have a little, in that case, African American would have more credence than black.
Okay.
Because African American at least designates a person to a place, even though that place is a whole continent with 54 countries. And that might not be even more specific to that because it's not designated to a nationality. It's this whole broad general continent that we got to think about. But it's a place, at least. But with black, there's nothing. There's just arbitrary. It's the crayon box.
Sure.
And I do believe that those are terms to divide us, and that's both of them. Because even within the sphere of the black community, that's why I say whatever they call us in this generation, that's how we identify ourselves. But they keep giving us these terms every 10 years, 20 years or so, or 50, whatever, how long it took for them to get that.
I think part of the problem too is the dominant society and people who control the narrative always categorize us, and we kind of fit into that. What I do like about what you're saying is you don't fit into that traditional narrative that everybody would have about a black person. Until black people are able to get themselves in a position where they can control how they want to be described. Usually the identification of a people is based on their culture, where they're from, their land. And since black people here don't have any significant amount of land to identify themselves with the land, that's usually back in the day how you were identified as a people. Here, to your point, because there is a social construct based on race, black folks are put into that category. But that's because there is a dominant group that continuously changes the name based on a census and based on who goes into. That's like Hispanics sometimes can mark that they're white. You want to do that if you're coming from outside into the country, because the closer you are to whiteness, the more closer you are to benefits, and you're not as much identified with those black folks down here. Right. So to your point, that's the political ramifications of being put into this racial culture,
into the census,
census that you're talking about. But normally a people are identified with the land, with their culture, and that's how we would describe a people.
Yes, sir.
Here in this country, everything to me, and I know a lot of people disagree, but everything is based on race. There's a hierarchy in race, black, yellow, brown, black, so forth and so on. And it's made that way to keep people divided. Now, in a perfect world, you would like to see the 99 come together, black, white, yellow, whoever, and go up against the 1%. But because we all are in groups in which those groups get parental treatment or benefits, they don't necessarily do that. That's what keeps us all separated. You know, like the affirmative action thing that just came out. A lot of folks now are like, okay, since you don't have affirmative action, we now.
So we back. We had a little intermission. We had to go get our popcorn and whatnot. So where we were talking about was whether or not just to kind of catch up and go kind of get back into that flow. I'd asked the question, does the idea of a society that has a mixture of people lend itself to the elites, if you will, categorizing us in ways that keeps us fighting against each other?
Absolutely.
Or, is there something else at play here? So
I think the former is exactly what it is, not the latter. That it lends itself with the central authority to keep creating these differences within a population that is united, because they realize that if the people realize that they're united, like I said, the 99% and that 1%, which is the central authority, which would be the government in any scale capacity, whether it be federal,
and the oligarchs,
state,
and the captains of it. I can't let them off the hook too.
The who?
Oligarchs.
Oh absolutely,
DuPont,
absolutely.
Carnegie's, Rockefellers. Those folks are really the ones, man, that control the United States. The government are the managers and the supervisors.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
So I just want to kind of throw them in the mix too. I don't want to let them off
because then we have the concept of what cronyism is, and these are the cronies that are being these bad actors that are manipulating the way this artificial market is. And even if the wealth that these people have, it's not really wealth, but it's inflated gains based off of private labor, and so it's squandered for public use. This is my issue with quote unquote democracy. And I'll go and say that on here right now. So, my issue with democracy is you have the people of a public, privileged, protected class voting around, amongst themselves what the private sector is supposed to acquiesce to against their will, in spite of the private sector being the real true arbiters of wealth and the generators of the economy that they're voting on to squander and to loot. Now, as far as us realizing that we're all united against that 1%, that would be a threat to them, because then they realize that they're not really that big at all. That's why I said earlier about African Americans or blacks being in these high political classes, there was no such thing as high, because really government is there is no scale. They're a small agency. Everywhere you go, there's about 12% of federal workers. So it's not like they're contributing something magnanimous to the economy in the surrounding area. They're there because we gave them that job, know, and they're subsidized off of public funds, which means that for the value that they bring, it's lacking. And I'm talking about in all public spheres, whether it be Department of Education, Department of Agriculture, all these different, the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, all these things are lacking, and they do not produce in conjunction with what they're being subsidized for. So to your point, yes, it lends the government to keep creating these different distinctions so that they can keep creating ways of fooling the people into thinking that we need them when we do not.
And to that point, I want to add, there have been a lot of examples of coalitions between folks, man, who don't necessarily look the same, whether that be Bacon's Rebellion, whether that be a fusion government in Wilmington. But probably the most recent example I can use is Dr. King in the 60s. What I don't like is the dominant society sanitizes his narrative a lot of times by making him to be some beloved teddy bear. To me, his legacy is some of what we're talking about. His ability to have the civil rights movement at the height of its success, along with a potential anti-war movement. Dr. King had the potential to bring those different factions together. And so what the government didn't want is they were already irritated and annoyed with the civil rights movement, but he also was popular amongst those young people who were pushing for us to come back out of the Vietnam War. And so he openly talked about the evils of capitalism. He openly talked about how we needed to redistribute resources to different folks, the whole nine. And so when he was assassinated, in my opinion, he was assassinated for those reasons. And so what we've seen in this country is anybody who is able to galvanize the people, regardless of what race they are, regardless of what their background is, and go up against the machine, their life is in peril. So it is designed to be separate. We're designed to be in these categories that they have established. What I mean by that is if you go to Africa prior to the 1800s, during the 1884 and 1885, they had the Conference of Berlin. And these were white men in Europe that sat around and talked about how they were going to cut up and create these borders and abstract resources from the continent of Africa. And so they created artificial borders, gave artificial names to different places that have been there for centuries. And so America is no different. And in my opinion, we're at the crossroads. Do we continue to go down the same road, continue to be a part of these parties, two primary parties, which is the Republicans and the Democrats, by the way, to do nothing for black folks, either one of them. And we'll talk about what we need to do as a solution. Or does the 99% say, you know what, we're human beings, we deserve a good wage, we deserve to have a good quality of life like everybody else? What are we willing to do to ensure that our children have that? If you are going to continue to do the same things, you're not going to do that. If you're going to say we're going to do something drastically different politically, economically, socially, it is what it is. But right now, the 99% is on the plantation, and I like to think that I'm the rebellious slave who is telling those folks, man, that we need to go in a different direction.
I like to think of myself as the rebellious engine. That's saying we need to do something different here. Yeah. And let me just make a little plug because, you know, I kind of agree with him. He said, like, the Democrats, the Republicans, they're not doing it, right? And from my perspective, the Democrats, when we're talking about the black community, they kind of, like what you said earlier before the show, they kind of put out a carrot. And they're like, here you go. Here's this little carrot. And then you never really get that carrot.
I won't even say it's a carrot. I'll say it's a Twinkie. Carrot's too healthy.
Right.
Okay.
So if you do get a carrot, it's going to have GMO in it and all kinds of stuff.
So you got this Twinkie. And you don't even get the whole thing, right? You get like a little nibble of it. And then I think that the Republican Party, so it gets tricky with the Republican Party because I think that most regular, everyday, normal Republican people, I don't think that they're racist.
Right.
Okay.
You think they get a bad rep?
I think so. I think they do have some stereotypes that they cling to that they need to be introduced otherwise. But I don't think they're actually outright racist. The Republican Party, though, I don't want to say that they're racist, but it feels like they just do things that kind of give that vibe,
right? That
kind of lend to this notion that, hey, the Republican Party is racist. I'm not so sure that they are. There's probably some who probably are. There's 320 million people in the U.S. Somebody racist, okay? But so I look at it and I say, okay, well, I don't think that they're necessarily racist, but they do things that kind of give that narrative. And then the problem that I have with the Democrats that follow that is they don't really work to undo any of those things. And so this is what made me a libertarian, because I kept watching, not really watching how they operate with the black community, but just watching how they operate in general. You have the Democrats, they fight for something and the Republicans maybe lose. And then when the Republicans are in power, then they don't really do anything to undo what they were fighting against previously. They just are like, all right, well, that's what it is, so now we'll use it. And then they'll fight for their thing. And then the Democrats, they'll be like, oh, we don't like this thing, but then the Republicans win. And so then what happens when the Democrats get in charge? They just basically keep whatever.
They keep piggybacking.
Right, and they keep piggybacking, and they bounce back and forth, and both parties just use what the other party won, whatever issue they won. They use it to their advantage when they get in power, rather than saying, we're going to dismantle. The Libertarians, however, we take an entirely different approach, and this is my plug. I think that the Libertarian Party is the party that would be beneficial not only to the black community, but to any community for that matter. Now, it's going to take, obviously we're going to have those conversations about, like, okay, how is that going to be advantageous to the black community or to any community for that matter? And that's where we'll have some disagreements, and that's fine. But that's, to me, that's the plug, is like, hey, look into the Libertarian Party, because you never know. I think they're going to be really beneficial to you. Libertarians coming your way. All right. Anyway, so that's my little
to
plug.
a home near you.
And I just, to your point, I wanted to quick shout out to Ice Cube, Political Bombcast. We need you right here, right next to us if you get a chance. But Ice Cube, a couple of years ago, came up with the contract with Black America, for those who don't know.
I remember that.
He initially took it to the Democratic camp. Biden, I think he was running at the time. And they told Ice Cube, I don't want to get the story wrong. That's why I want you to come on Political Podcast, making a plug for you. But from what I understand of the story, they told him to wait till after the election. What kills me about that is you don't know if you're going to be elected anyway.
Absolutely.
So that right there was problematic to begin with. Nonetheless, he then takes his ball and goes over to the Republican Party, and they say they'll listen to it. Neither one of them did anything with the contract with Black America. But what was interesting is the elite black gatekeepers with the Democratic Party shamed Ice Cube for doing something for black folks. Now, never mind, it was a contract with Black America, but because he ran off the plantation and entertained doing something that was outside of the norm, he was shamed about it.
Because it's because he didn't. Yeah, it's because he didn't check
again,
in,
isn't it?
Say that again about check in.
He's like, he didn't. Ice Cube didn't check in with the common narrative of those supposed to be the gatekeepers of black liberation. That's why.
Didn't check in.
Yeah, he didn't check in. He ain't check in with Al Sharpton. He didn't check in with Jesse Jackson. He didn't check in with.
They all.
So
It's about time to go sit down.
I'm gonna throw a joke in here because I just can't.
Go ahead.
I can't help
Go
it.
ahead. Go ahead.
He didn't check himself before.
Shut up.
Oh man, that was corny,
All right.
but that was good though.
So now I
That was corny though.
just guaranteed he ain't
Right
coming
here.
on the show now.
Right here.
He could be like, no, I ain't
Right
sitting
here.
next to that fool.
Like,
I saw you on the Breakfast Club. I need you
But
right here. We don't.
Didn't I see that people are throwing at him again over something? Like, yeah, he was in a picture with some people, and they were like, "What are you doing in that picture with?"
Oh, that was JFK Jr.
Yeah.
and I can't think of the other guy.
RFK.
He was with.
RFK.
What did I say? JFK.
yeah, you said JFK.
I'm sorry. RFK. RFK.
So now RFK,
RFK
coming on.
said I done messed him up and everything, but I don't know the other
We
gentlemen.
got
but
Psycho
both
and
of them
JFK, and
and wrecking yourself.
ain't nobody coming on our show with
Rest in
us.
peace, JFK.
So
Yeah, he probably did that to ruffle some feathers. He feels like, hey, I'm already out here the whole nine. Let me go
Right.
ahead and get up under some folks.
He's
skin.
he's way too proactive. He's at the point where he's tired. I mean, Ice Cube he's been in the fight for a long time for his cause for too many years.
affiliated with the nation and
You see
Khalid
what I'm saying?
Muhammad.
He's
Yeah.
been doing this for
Right.
way too
Yeah.
long to be waiting for somebody's
Right.
opinion about what he should be doing. I mean, he did the Big Three, the independent league of basketball for retirees who retired from the NBA. It's a 3-on-3 half-court game.
Shout out to the Big
Shout out
Three.
to the Big Three, man. And he's a very proactive brother, dude. And they don't like for someone to go ahead and proactively move ahead and move the needle forward. And because what it does is it dismantles the notion that African Americans have never made progress. For as long as we have the narrative that we've never made any iota for years and years since slavery or whatever the hell, then everything is going to be cool. They can still wax poetic about race hustling, just like BLM, like Black Lives Matter. They have their own opinions about Black Lives Matter. They're a fraud organization. News4Jax had an article about them that just came out not too long ago. I forget what it was even about, but I think it was about their legacy 10 years after the deaths of these young men like Trayvon Martin. And I said, to hell with everybody in BLM. I do not care, because they use tragedy and trauma of these young men who've been killed by agents of government to spew off this movement of fraud and illegitimate actions within the organization, taking money away from people who had their heart set up on it, only for them to buy themselves mansions, pay out people that's in their direct vicinity, and they just go off into the sunset, and the people are still suffering. So they won't. There's a firm place for the members of BLM within the Seven Hells.
wow, that's strong words, man. Goodness. Oh, by the way, a little correction here. Trayvon Martin, I don't think he was killed by agents of the whatever you called it. I think it was just an agent of dumbassery.
Yeah,
The dude, because I'm like, look,
Yeah.
Like okay, you saw the man.
Did I mention his name? Did I say Trayvon?
You did. You said you didn't say him specifically, but you mentioned his name.
I was thinking about Eric Garner.
Okay,
and
definitely,
people like that.
yeah. Those, because
Michael Brown.
Mike Brown,
yeah,
exactly.
because they were killed by police. Whereas Trayvon Martin was, as you remember, he was killed by just a regular citizen.
Some dude,
some dumbass.
He was, but the state supported him, and he got off when he was tried in a court of law. So although he
still gave him protection, right?
Even though he's not necessarily a police officer or part of law enforcement per se, there seemed to be a support of what he did. Not only from the power structure, but from those men who agreed with the fact that he was well within his rights to take the life of a young black male regardless. So even though he does not fit into the category of an Eric Gardner, of a Michael Brown, Sandra Bland, Philando Castile, et cetera, he still fits up under that umbrella of folks, man, who was taken out by a vigilante, if you will. So it may not have been a police officer per se, but
just
he was
just like Ahmaud Arbery that one time.
Yes,
very similar.
Yeah, very
similar. So
very similar.
I would actually say that Ahmaud Arbery was quite different than Trayvon, because the two guys that ended up killing him, both of them, they weren't active duty at the time, but they were police, so they did have the requisite training, right? So they weren't necessarily like Zimmerman. I'm trying to think of his first name. The Zimmerman guy who killed Trayvon. Yeah, George Zimmerman. So they weren't necessarily like George Zimmerman, who was just some guy. Now, I actually disagree a little bit. I don't think that George Zimmerman. I think his actions were legitimate in terms of the actual killing itself. I think he was a dumbass in following somebody, and from the evidence that I remember,
you know, I'm gonna
is that it's fine. The evidence that I remember is that the actual physical altercation itself started once Trayvon jumped on and pounced on him, right? And so at that point, that's when you have this action that needs to be dealt with. Now, up until that point, I would because it's not a crime to follow somebody. It's not a crime to follow somebody while you're armed. It's dumb. You shouldn't. And you can say that there's some level of negligence when an outcome happens, but at the same time, it is a crime to start jumping on, swinging on somebody just because they're following you.
I take issue with it for a lot of reasons. If it would have been an affluent white female, I don't think we get into the tussle. I think there is something to be said about young black youth that we justify having an altercation in which somebody loses their life, particularly when they're not armed. So for me, I always have a problem with that because I, as a person who used to be downtown working at the bank, whatever they call the stadium now where the Jaguars play at, I've seen men and women spit on the police. They don't look like me. I've seen them cuss. I've seen them do a number of different things. And that's not to say that a black person singularly or individually has not gotten away with that. But as a collective, I would never think about doing something like that. So in that particular case, for him to be justified in killing him, maybe I can go along the lines of grabbing him or detaining him or running behind him or something like that. I can rationalize that to a certain extent.
Pepper spraying or something.
But that does not happen if it's a white individual, particularly if they're rich, particularly if they're a female.
So what happens and what I think should happen are definitely different. Because in my opinion, if let's say that that George Zimmerman had been following a white woman that he thought was a criminal of some sort, and let's just say that this white woman was one of the few women that could actually physically put a challenge to a man, right? Like, because I mean, let's face it, like a lot of women just can't overpower a man. That's just the way it is.
Right.
And let's say that woman jumped him and just started wailing on him, right? And then he ended up pulling out his firearm and shooting her. I would have been of the same opinion. I would have been like, look, you shouldn't have followed her. That was stupid. And if we want to say that there's some level of, I keep wanting to say neglect, negligence for following somebody that led to an altercation, then I'm okay with that. However, I would say to that white woman, you do not jump on somebody and start wailing on them, because you don't know how they're going to respond. And for libertarians, we take the idea of aggression very serious. And so, number one, we don't believe that you should ever make a threat towards somebody. And like, if you pull your firearm out, we're very, very strict. We're like, look, you do not pull out a firearm unless you were prepared to put it through somebody, right? Like shoot somebody and kill them. And like, that is the only, you don't pull it out to try to threaten them.
Right.
Right. Like I mean, there is that situation where you might pull it out and say, look, if you don't back up, I'll shoot you. Right. But you're generally not bringing it out to be like, look, I got this gun. You really want to play? Like, no, you bring it out knowing that the moment you bring it out, that a bullet may come out of it.
Right.
And you are prepared to to send that bullet out. So you do not pull it out
He wouldn't have shot her.
Right. Now, if the person backs up quickly enough and then you can get away with not shooting them, hey, great, then it worked, and everybody lives to see another day, and that's fine. So when I look at aggression, when I look at violence and stuff like that, I treat it the same. And there have been stories where where it's been the other foot, if you will, the other side of the story, a different, like a white person or what that. I'm like, nah, I'm like, you started, you attacked that person. I can't think of anything at the moment, but there have been stories where I'm like, nope, that black person that shot that white person, totally legit. And that white person shouldn't have done it. You break in their house and they shoot you. I don't care that you're white. You shouldn't have been in the damn house.
Even if it's law enforcement, like in the Breonna Taylor situation.
So I'll give you a local example because we want to try to talk about local stuff.
That's right.
There wasn't a shooting, but Breonna Taylor, yes, absolutely. Her boyfriend that shot at the police, totally. I'm behind him,
Totally.
and I'm glad that he got acquitted for it.
You're gonna make some white folks real mad, though.
You know what? That's too bad. But here in Jacksonville, like it was like what 2-3 months ago. There was a situation where police showed up at a house. They knocked on the door. I don't remember where it was here in Jacksonville. It was on the north side somewhere. A black family opened up the door. Police are like, "Hey, we're looking for this woman. Is they're like, "Nope, that's not me." And the police, the recording.
Is that the situation where the female got her teeth knocked out?
She had the red hair.
I don't know.
She had the short red hair. I don't remember the name of the person or where or whatever. But it was only like a few months ago. But she had like red hair. And so this video of like the family members, and there's an altercation. At one point, they're like, "What are you doing? What's going on?" The police is like, "We're trying to figure this out." One of the police members was like, "We're trying to figure this out," while the other people were being basically wrestled by the other police, right? And so I will say this, and this is not going to make people happy, but if the police break into your home and they don't belong there, you can defend your home the same way as anybody would.
I'm with you on that. I'm glad somebody said it.
And I mean, nobody likes to hear that, but when you don't belong in someone's on someone's property, when you don't belong there.
Shout out to JSO. You do the wrong thing. Hey.
And like in the same way, in the same way that Breonna Taylor's boyfriend was justified in shooting at the police.
Right, exactly.
Had somebody shot at the police in that at a certain point, I think it would have been justified. So here's the end of the story, right? At least that I know of. I haven't followed up with it. So the woman is sitting in the car. She happens to see that they have pictures of who they're looking for. And she's like, "That doesn't look like my hair. That doesn't look like me. There is no reason for you to have believed that this was me."
Right.
And I think that this is where I look and I say we have a huge policing problem in this country right now. We want to talk about it mostly about here in Jacksonville.
Yeah.
And, I think that the police that broke into that house, I think they should be held accountable. And so what does the Libertarian Party bring the black community? I'll tell you right now, first thing that we would do if we ever got power, and this is why the Republicans and Democrats will work their ass off to make sure we don't get it. But one of the first things that we would do is end qualified immunity.
That's right.
We would end it. And you know how that'll work? I mean, you know how I know that it won't work? Because the moment that it starts getting talked about, police unions are like, "Look, we won't be able to do our jobs if we have qualified immunity. And all these officers are going to quit." And I'm like, "Oh, really? So you can't do your jobs without being violent toward people that don't need to be violent against?"
Exactly.
Oh, okay. Well, then maybe you need to leave. Bye.
We got a new sheriff now.
Bye, Felicia. Ice Cube, that's for you.
We got a new sheriff that the people have elected. And so I know a lot of people like, give him time. In you guys' opinion, from a libertarian perspective, what is the expectations of him? And is there anything that he can do in the next couple of years that will meet those expectations?
I expect him to follow the orders that he's given from the state.
Which is?
This pretty much go with the same program that the last sheriff and the sheriff before that end up implementing.
Oh, you're talking about that's what you expect them to do.
That's what I expect them to do.
What do you want him
What
to
do you want them to do?
Just stop qualified immunity.
Okay, so for the people out there who don't know what qualified immunity is, can you break it down to them?
Break it down. It prevents officers from necessarily being sued.
Wrong guy.
Please help me.
Me. God. Let him up.
Oh, God, my arm. You broke my arm. I'm going to sue you for everything you've got.
Case dismissed.
What?
Qualified immunity, it's not for you, it's just for me. I shot your dog. I shot your wife. I get to go on with my life. It's not that you don't have some rights, but when we get you in our sights, we can't be sued. You've got no case. It's time for you to learn your place. Qualified immunity, it strips all liability. I stole your cash. I broke your jaw. Look it up, it's settled law. Qualified immunity, we get off without penalty. I broke down your front door while serving a search warrant on the wrong house at 3 a.m. and then I shot you in the face. Twice. Oh dear.
Okay, see you later.
Yeah.
But
So, and I'll just say this: Rand Paul, back in I think it was 2021, whatever. I think that was the year that Breonna Taylor, the incident happened. I think it was in June. He put forward a bill in the Senate that would end qualified immunity. It was like one page, and it was very simple. It didn't have all this other garbage.
500 pages.
Yeah, it
You
didn't
got to
have all
decide on this in
crap.
24
Nope.
hours. No.
Right, and it didn't have all this other crap that didn't need to be in there. It literally was like, look, we're going to end qualified immunity. I think it was a little bit more specific than that. So it was,
Right.
But it was basically one page, very simple, and I believe 3 Republicans co-signed it, 0 Democrats.
Absolutely.
And virtually every libertarian that I know was all about it. They were like, "Do it, make it happen."
Not
End that.
the Democrats is always hollering about, this black person got shot, blah blah blah. Not them.
Because they need that narrative to be alive, to be needed. That's the thing about
Speaking
it.
of JSO and TK Waters, I agree that he's probably just going to do the same old. And here's the reason why: because we had who was his opponent initially?
I'm about to say, goodness gracious, Lakeisha Burton.
Lakeisha Burton, that's her name.
So Officer
Shout out to
Burton.
Lakeisha Burton.
Officer Burton
She
came
got
out.
a job though. She got a government job.
She did.
Yeah.
But she came out to
She'll
the
be
Libertarian
okay.
Party. She came out to the Libertarian Party. We reached out to both her and TK
Yeah,
Waters.
she did.
Yep.
She showed up.
Yep. We recorded it. We put it out on our social media. So she came
that's
out and
respect.
she answered some questions. It wasn't always what we wanted to hear.
Yeah.
Okay, which is fine. I get it. But she didn't say some of the things that we wanted to hear, and she was his opponent. He tends to be more of the Republican guy, right? And so I don't expect that the Republicans are going to be any better. In fact, I think they'll probably be worse because the Republicans tend to be, law and order. We got to have all these laws.
We gotta flood the
Blue
streets
Lives
with
Matter.
more policemen.
Right.
Like I said, Blue Lives Matter.
Right.
And
So
they're-
I think he'll actually be worse than she would, and I wasn't a big fan of some of the answers that she gave.
because they are less likely to bring accountability to the police.
But I will give her a shout out for coming out.
Yeah, that's much respect
That's
to
awesome.
Lakeisha Burton for even coming out and speaking to us. I wasn't there personally because I work overnight, so I wasn't able to go to that meeting. But Marcus Reeder, the former vice chair of the Libertarian Party of Duval County, he was there and he told me about it once we went out there canvassing the next day. So during my run for city council in District 8. So now, like I said, with the Republican Party, I feel like they're less likely to hold the police accountable because, like you said, they believe in such law and order, and they want to flood more streets with policemen because they feel like that's the only way for the people to be safe.
Right.
But with the Libertarians, what we say is we think the opposite way. We think the more laws that you make in Jacksonville specifically, the more crime is going to be committed because with the stroke of a pen, you create more criminals.
Right.
So with more laws being written, there's more of a budget going into the into JSO.
Right.
With more budget going to JSO, that's less money going to the people. It's more money coming out of the people. And with more money coming out from the people, that's more economic destitution. With more economic destitution, less opportunities and more crime.
Right.
And with more crime, more for police presence. More police presence, more interactions that's not going to be favorable to people, especially in the African American communities, because we're so marginalized in these areas, especially south of Trout River, Myrtle, Moncrief, Avenue B, all these areas. There's going to be more chances, in the north side period, where we're going to have these interactions with police, but it's not going to be favorable to us. It might lead to fatalities, may lead to other undesirable things. And so with that, when this stuff happens all over again, it'll just be purgatory. It's just a never-ending thing.
And we actually, here's something that I don't know if Anthony even knows. I know you know this. The Libertarian Party largely, I mean, not everybody, but largely would, we would have no issue going back to the Black Panther patrols, that the ones that where they
Absolutely,
totally support that.
Definitely.
Right?
I was just about to speak. What I wanted to say was I agree with that. There's some things I push back on what you said though, Ron. I feel like in order for us to have significant crime reduction, I think the first thing we need to do is need to bring those resources back to the community. But I also think there needs to be a code of ethics that's infused into the community. When I say about resources, whether you were Italian, whether you were Irish, whether you were a Jew, they were killing each other too, and I think there was a breakdown in terms of what was going on. Mm-hmm. But the government,
if you haven't seen Gangs of New York, it kind of talks about that.
The government said that, we're going to give you the resources that you need. We're going to give you jobs. We're going to provide some level of stability. And too often, I think there is a neglect with black folks for doing that. However, I think black folks need to take more responsibility too.
Of course,
in terms of being more intentional about pulling together resources and their money to create some things that they need to do in the community. I think we need to go back to having those patrols. I think there needs to be a code of ethics. Every group has a code of ethics that police their own community. Mm-hmm. The more you have of that, the less you will have more police intervention that's taking place too. In addition to that, a group of us came up with a program called Students to Troops, in which we suggested that there be a pilot program at Rains High School, Reball High School, and Andrew Jackson for those individuals who are interested in getting in law enforcement. The intent is to incentivize people at the age of 17, 18 to go into the police academy, get a stipend for coming back and policing their own community. You would then have 3 years from the time that they are operational and they are serving the community to take that data, analyze that data to see if the crime had been reduced, and to see how the relationship between those folks who police those communities, did it increase? Did it get better? Was it the same? If it's the same, if it got worse, you can scrap it. If it got better, then you can keep it. So those are just some solutions. JSO, TK, I hope you're listening the whole nine. While we're sitting around here spending all this money with this new transitional team that you put together, including, what's the girl name that ran? Lakeisha?
Yeah,
Lakeisha
Burden. Yeah.
Hope you're listening to the podcast. So those are some little solutions.
Isn't that the same program that they're pitching to Down and Deegan, as far as the Jacksonville, I forget what it was called, was this new initiative that you're probably talking about.
You talking about the Explorer program?
No,
that's already out?
They're talking about some old program that
was dropped back in the day. They're reviving.
Yeah, they're reviving an old program. I don't remember the name of it, and I think it was many years ago. And so I don't know anything about it. I don't know if it's a good program. I don't know if it'll work. I got nothing on that. So we'll have to come back to that. I think we're getting close to our time, so maybe we should wrap it up and let people know there is a seat. You can't see it on the screen at the moment, but there is a seat for another person. Because what we want to do, we want to hear.
You don't necessarily have to sit next to him. If you want to sit next to the token,
hey man, can I have
or the swole guy?
I can have somebody sit next to me. Let me have this.
So what we're looking for is, if you are a melanated Black African American person, I think I got it all right.
You hit everything.
I hit it all. So if you are a member of the Black community and you are here in Jacksonville, what we want you to do is hop on Twitter, look up P Bombcast. All right, Political Bombcast, P Bombcast, and we'll put that up on the screen here. And what we want you to do is go there, record a video. It's got for Twitter, it's got to be 2 minutes and 20 seconds or less. Record a video giving us your best rant. Now, do we want to talk about a topic for next month, for the next episode?
For the next episode, we can talk about the stadium.
Stadium? Mm-hmm. All right. So the stadium it is. So next episode is going to be about the stadium. So we want to hear some rants. And what we're going to do
We need it.
is
We need that stadium.
we're gonna
remodel.
And it doesn't matter whether you're for it or against it. Doesn't matter, right? You just give us your rant. We don't care if you it don't matter.
Now,
It don't matter
I
how
just
well
want
you
to clarify
speak.
something. Are you for paying the taxes for the renovation of a new stadium, or are you against paying those taxes?
Right.
I just want to clarify.
That's going to be the
exactly.
subject for the video.
Right, talk about the upgrades, and so what we want to do is it doesn't matter whether you're a great speaker, or it doesn't matter whether you use profanity. We don't really care, right? We just want to hear from
Speak
local
your
people.
truth, your
Speak-
passion.
Yes, absolutely. Bring your unbridled passion, because we're not going to be like Terrence Freeman up in city council, like, hey, sit down because you use some naughty language. Like, we're not like that, okay? And we're going to bring
Shout
you
out
in.
to Terrence.
Right, yeah, it's kind of a shout out. We're gonna bring you in, and your voice is gonna be heard, and we're gonna have a conversation. You can grill, like depending on what side you fall on, you can grill whoever here and say, well, look, I got a bone to pick with you, and,
Right.
and it's gonna be all good. We're gonna have a lot of fun in the coming episodes. So please remember, Political Bombcast. What else should they do? Anything else? Any other action items?
And the other action items, not that I
Let
can
people know
think
who
of.
we are. Like, subscribe, do all that, ring the bell, ding, 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 whatever.
Well, since we're gonna have a YouTube page, go ahead and subscribe to the channel
Like,
for updates.
Subscribe. Hit that button. Also, I want to give a quick shout out before we get out of here to world renowned, talented young producer, man, that's doing some things. He provided us, man, with the track, the intro, and the outro. So I want to give him a quick shout out, man. Keep doing your thing, man. And one day y'all gonna hear him. The whole world will be him. So quick shout out to world renowned, man. Keep lacing them tough tracks.
All right, awesome. Well, we'll see you around next time, folks. But for now, Political Bombcast, we're out.
People's champ out.
Peace.